True Sports family, thank you for listening to this episode of the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. Today's guest is Andrew Coates, and I took this conversation in a couple different directions. The truth is, Andrew took this conversation in a bunch of different directions. We talk about his original education or his undergraduate degree, which was actually in business and finance, and how he took some of that knowledge, applied it to his career as one of the best personal trainers out there today. He has an unbelievable podcast, which is called the Live Free and Diet Hard Pod. I listened to a bunch of episodes in preparation for this, and unbelievable guests, unbelievable content. So make sure you go listen to that immediately. You can find him Andrew Coates Fitness on Instagram. A wealth of knowledge. I loved my time with Andrew Coates. Without further ado, here's my conversation. Welcome back to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. Legendary strength coach. You're welcome. Andrew Coates, welcome to the party, man. Thanks for making time.
Thank you. And you know, I actually appreciate that. Funny enough, even though I function that role with some of my training, I don't really go by the moniker strength coach as much as, hey, I'm a personal trainer, full-time personal trainer to this day, because I'm not a CSCS, right? So I want to make sure I'm being a little
Fair.
pedantically technical on that one, but thank you.
Fair. Okay. Here's what's fascinating about you that I think really sets you apart by a lot of people in the industry. Your background is really fascinating because, like you said, you don't have a CSCS, but your undergraduate work is in what?
Bachelor of Commerce. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, business, right? And
Yeah.
we're missing a lot of that. So tell me what in your day-to-day life as a personal trainer, self-described personal trainer,
Mhm.
where do you use your business education?
Okay. Let's go big picture. I think a lot of coaches are amazing at the training side of stuff. I think they love technical training. I think they will go down rabbit holes and they will consume training education endlessly. We're going to do a little bit of that today, right? As you plan. I think that when presented with the discomfort of being busy in the industry, I think people will all too often look on social media and they'll see the people with larger numbers in front of their bios, which are not always real, by the way. That's an important thing to know. Or the people who are kind of have these loud presences, and now we see a lot of like stitch-based, argumentative, combative sort of stuff in the industry. And there are some great people I love who do this sort of stuff, and then there's some people who I'm just like, I have no time for who do this. And I think a lot of coaches get lured into thinking, well, this is the way you're supposed to go in order to stay busy. And no, I think the business skills, first of all, yes, there are technical business skills, but I think a lot of this stuff is just being, I think great coaching. I think asking great questions. I think being just a wonderful human. I think bedside manner. We know through research that the medical doctors who get sued the least are the ones who just have a better bedside manner, regardless of the actual outcome of the patient.
And
Um,
by the way, not to cut you off, but it's like a matter of minutes in a room. Like the longer you
mm,
spend in a room, I think like the cutoff is like 6 minutes. If you're below 6 minutes in a room with a patient, the chances you get sued skyrocket and they come way down if you spend more than 6 minutes. So it's like understanding how to connect to people. Yeah, okay, no one wants to get sued, but we're talking about the relationship. That's what I wanted to dig in with you because I think that's where you're going.
and with relationships, I mean, what do relationships do really well? They tend to give you referrals. All right, I'll give you an example. And I didn't learn this stuff in business school. Business school gives you a valuable frame on some stuff. And you know, I don't do my own accounting. I did classes in accounting. I hire an accountant because I don't like doing bookkeeping and accounting. It's a smart business decision to outsource this stuff so I can actually do more of what I love. I have a client. He trained with me, short notice. He hops off a plane. He's a busy and wealthy industrialist. Okay. It's not about like going the extra mile for someone who's got more money. That's not it at all. We're good friends. I've been training him a long time. Came to me well over a decade ago. And then he brought me his 15-year-old son, who happened to be a WHL hockey player. So I actually work with, it's not a big part of my work or brand, but I work with a number of young hockey players, right? I'm going to be inheriting a couple more, which actually are this guy's girlfriend, who I train 3 times a week, her sons. I'm going to inherit these guys, and these guys, they have the potential to maybe make the WHL. But this guy sent me his son. I worked with him for years. Sent me his daughter. I work with her in pockets. Sent me other people from his life. Sent me another friend of his who sent me his ex-wife, and she's been a regular training with me. And so you have this giant cascade. Some people I've hung out with him socially. He's invited me out to dinners a fair bit. We socialize, and just recently, some people that I met through him just sent me referrals of this couple who are now trading with me, or who are happy. So there's this giant referral tree.
Hmm.
And I can't always accommodate on short notice. Hey, on a Sunday evening, I happen to have a home gym in addition to the facility I train at. So he hops off a plane, texts me. He's like, "Hey, what are you up to?" I was like, "I had a dinner later," and I'm like, "Okay, I know you want to trade. Can you make it here at 4 o'clock? I can carve this out." Right? I love hanging out with him. It's a boost on my day. He comes over, we train, we have a great time. I go off to my dinner. Excellent, right? And it's not that you have to do stuff like this, but it's the deeper relationship. I think every client matters. You want to try to show up and do the best you can. You have to have reasonable boundaries as well. But if you love what you do, I tell this to my clients all the time. They select me, but I also self-select them. And I say that not out of a point of elitism. It's to say, like, I choose you. I like working with you. I enjoy spending my time with you. I'll be 48 soon. I think in our industry, there's a lot of meshing, especially from the personal trainer side, that you need to go online, that you need to get away from the gym floor, that it's like the natural progression, that being a personal trainer is the lowest status thing in the industry. Listen, I met a lot of online coaches who are struggling. They look around, everybody's putting on a good show on social media, and they think they're the only one who's struggling. And meanwhile, I have a very lucrative, sustainable, long-term, busy in-person business. I do the online stuff. I have the podcast. Yes, I've gotten to write for some big publications and speak at big events. That doesn't even move the needle on my core business, right? It's the human element of the person in front of me. And I think in the physical therapy world, especially, um, we're seeing, like, a lot of the physical therapists that I'm friends with, they they're great strength coaches too. They value strength conditioning, and they spend more time with the people they work with, as opposed to this churn model where they get all these people are coming in from, car accidents. Those people deserve the care too, but you've got a physical therapist running around between 8 different people. Here's a sheet of paper. Here, do this band exercise, this thing, this, like, and passive treatment has its place to help people feel better, get out of pain, to be able to load and move into it. But it's actually an important part of this stuff. But if all you're doing is passive as a business model, and I understand there's some people that don't want to be there, they don't want to do the other things. Like, you're trying to help. I get it. But I still think that if you want a really successful business, no matter where you are, it's just showing up, do the human side really, really well. And I find a lot of the other things take care of themselves.
Okay, did you get that whole spiel? Did you get that in business school?
No,
Okay.
that just comes from life. I mean, I also struggled. Like, I was good at the skill of school. I was very good at the skill of school. And then I got out in the real world and I wasn't very good at the skill of working in these different environments, and fumbled around with stuff. I've owned a nightclub. That was a lot of fun, a lot of headaches. That was a different world. Picture partying in the upstairs of my bar in St. John's, Newfoundland, where I grew up, having drinks with Collective Soul and my buddies who played in the NHL and this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, that sounds great. You get a lot of life experience out of this stuff. But I think my job before, I've been a personal trainer for over 15 years. I worked in a casino for a while as a poker room supervisor and as a poker dealer. And I think a lot of it came from just interacting with people in those kind of environments. You just get enough exposure to this stuff. I think I never had a traditional sales job when I was younger, but I think younger people, like, if you get a sales job, good idea. Working in nightclub, work in service industry.
Yeah.
You just get in front of a lot of people. You learn how to manage people. I worked the front door of a nightclub, both before and after owning my own club. And the way you greet people at the door, you can filter a lot of problems. You can set the tone. They come in and they have a good time inside. You shake a lot of hands. I made a lot of friends in those worlds, and that's a lot easier than the. And I had buddies who were dumbasses who they had a chip on their shoulder and they looked for trouble, right? And my attitude was, let me just shake hands, make good with people. People remember me in a positive way, and there's just two different ways that you can go about these careers, and any career. I think one of the books that shaped me the most, but aligned with the things that I was figuring out, was Seth Godin's Linchpin, and it's the I think a lot of people go into careers, a lot of the kind of jobs I just talked about, and they think, well, I'm not being paid very much, so therefore I'm only going to give this the effort that I'm being paid for. Whereas
Hmm.
my attitude was, well, I got to do this job anyway. I'm in front of people. I like people by and large. As I get older, I'm a little bit more picky about that, people's energy. But I want to remember names and I want to have a more positive experience. If people like me, my job is easier, and I need this job at the stage of my life. I don't have the options and opportunities that I have now. So I got to show up at every day. And if I hate it, it compounds. But if I make the best of it, it compounds. And I, to this day, have clients who train with me now who I used to deal poker to, like, almost 20 years ago. right? Because they knew my integrity, the way I treated people. I would make sure I dealt a really good game, a fast game, a fair game. I knew the rules. I remember names. I could, even something as simple as like a poker table. If you can move the action faster, players are more engaged. They appreciate you. Whereas like a really slow dealer, it's torturous.
Yeah, yeah. Which okay. So the correlations there, I guess, to what we do for a living are obvious. But you just told me everything you learned in life and how that positively affected what you do now. What did you learn in business school that positively affects the way you do business today?
I mean, I've thought about this sometimes. I mean, I still think the best thing I got out of university was a social experience. I grew up in a really small rural town, and I wasn't a popular kid growing up. I was, comparatively speaking, a tiny town. I was a smart kid. My dad owned the local business, and that didn't necessarily lend you well to, relationships with the other kids. And I don't know, maybe I wasn't that good at social stuff. So I buried myself in video games. I played a lot of sports. I like things like Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, if anybody's watching video, if there is video, I've got my Witcher figures up over my shoulder here. And, music. And I was outdoors a lot. And, I kind of hid away from the world a little bit too. I was bullied as a kid. That's no fun, right? And I got to university, and university was an explosion of a social experience for me. So, like I said, going to university was a skill of doing well and getting good grades. I tried to think my way through. I did some marketing courses. I'm sure those had an impact.
Yeah.
Those could have hurt it. I remember a course on communication. I mean, English literature stuff. I was always a good writer, but then the stuff you learn in English literature is stuff you don't want to apply when you're writing copywriting for social media or anything like that. So there's some differences there. Over my shoulder is a bunch of books on writing, which I've enjoyed studying. So I think the skill of learning is still valuable. There's tons of stuff that I've never used and forgotten. I understand a lot of valuable principles about finance, which has been how I've approached my own personal investment management, which I do, which has been really valuable. I think that can get a lot of people in trouble. So there's a lot of valuable life skill there. But I mean, I don't think often that, oh, this course made me good at this thing in a career that happened over, where am I now? Is I've been out of university for 23 years, right?
Yeah.
So I actually don't see a lot of like, oh, this course helped me with this, right? It's not
No,
like someone who went to physical therapy school and is literally practicing it.
yeah, that's fair. By the way, like if I had to do it again, I would not. I majored in kinesiology. I would not have done that. I think that was a mistake. Like I really
Mm.
appreciate your life experience, whether it was volitional or not. Like you studied something that was um, ancillary to your primary
Mm.
profession as opposed to just studying your primary profession. I just think there's tremendous value there. That's why I wanted to
Mm.
like tease on it. I wish I would have done that. You made an interesting comment in an interview that I recently saw about
Mm.
ways in which you developed your book of business. And you told a story about how you're working in a gym and there was a mass exodus of other trainers, and those athletes, clients, eventually chose you because they noticed the way you were interacting on the floor
Mm.
and that you were training your current clients. Can you distill those sessions
Mm.
and what you think set you apart? Because I think that's super valuable to everyone listening. How do you create a good session?
Okay. So on the granular level about creating a good session, I mean, I can't say this enough because we've all been in the commercial gyms. We've seen, the kind of the bad stereotype trainer, and then occasionally get ones that stands out in a very good way. Uh, it's absolutely just being engaged with the person in front of you. Like we've seen a lot of trainers who are they look like they don't want to be there. It's body language, it's energy, just being really engaged. And I would get this comment very frequently. This one, like people just have like wars over this because there's always this really low brow threads comment, do trainers need to be in shape or whatever. All I can say from my experience is that the people have self-selected me. I am tall, which you cannot control, and I have been a very muscular person, like walking around somewhere between 240 and 260 pounds for a long time. Guess what? The feedback I've gotten is that it
It
matters. Okay.
matters. Yeah.
I think that there's the type that ideologically want to say it doesn't. Yes, your knowledge is absolutely paramount. The way you treat people, the results you get, but people also do make value judgments too. So I think this matters more for personal trainers in a gym setting than it does necessarily for the physical therapy professionals. But I'll just leave it out there. You do with that what you will. Some people are going to like turn around and be like, oh, that's wrong. It's like it, the people who are telling you it doesn't matter are lying to you. It's just not the only thing that matters, right? It's a piece of a very big puzzle. But I think it's just being visible on the floor. Busy begets busy. People see you there all the time. And then there's also an art too, when you're focused on the client in front of you, is also to be able to smile at the person that walks by, to engage. A lot of time it was actually introducing people. This is something that goes a long way. Is you got someone new coming at the gym, just introduce them to some of the bigger, scarier looking like jacked friends of yours at the gym, and it goes a long way to diffusing
Yep.
the fear factor that some people have and makes them feel really welcome. That one goes a long way. And a lot of the coaches I worked alongside of in the trainers in the early days, some were great, but some was a trainer I had a lot of conflict with, who had a very sour, negative disposition, would walk around and largely ignore people unless she believed that that person would somehow directly benefit her financially. And it pretty much radiated, right? She was sort of
Hmm.
like, had a weird reputation. She was a skilled trainer, but there were a lot of other ethical and integrity flaws as well. Got involved in multi-level marketing scam, and then got kind of predatory with recruiting on that stuff. So that's just a whole different thing. It was a very bad experience just to deal with a shared place. But I got most of the walk-up business in that space because I'd go around, I'd say hi to people, I would talk to people, I would spend the extra time being visible again on that floor. And that compounded. And I, to this day, still have a lot of clients from those days, or people who've been referred from people I work with in those days, or referrals from general gym goers. Because if you think about this, again, this is less about the doctor of physical therapy and more about the trainer. But if you see the jack people in the gym, the fit athletic people who, you think, oh, they would never need a trainer. Well, guess what? They're actually very highly attuned to who are the skilled and professional people, and they know people, and they refer parents and friends and whatever.
Yep.
So you could get a lot of referrals from those kind of people.
Dude, that first of all, you take it for granted. It is really sage advice. Like the understanding to know that every single person that puts eyes on you is not just a potential client, but a referral source.
Mhm.
That does totally resonate in my world because as a doctor of physical therapy, especially in direct access states, which just means that a patient can walk in and come to you without seeing a doctor, that's imperative. Like we get far more referrals at True Sports that are direct access. Like they Googled us, they saw us, friend of a friend, et cetera, than we do from doctors. I mean, hugely. It's a vast number and a vast discrepancy. So I think that's really important. And I love hearing that from other professionals, even like in the personal training world where you think that is your bread and butter, that should be ours too. The other thing that I heard previously from your first answer was your job satisfaction is up to you.
Mhm.
That's really interesting because we have a lot of employees that make it their business to have a good day. That
Mhm.
is infectious. If you can
You
make it
can't train
your
it.
job, you can't. Yeah, there's no
Be
question.
and there's a lot of people in business will say they'll actually self-select to those kind of traits. So I'll go back to something that shows up in the book Lynchpin. So if someone is listening to this and finds this really helpful, go read the book Lynchpin, Seth Godin, um, and understand that it was written ahead of its time. So now a lot of the ideas in there will sound really like, oh yeah, this is the way the world works. Well, it wasn't at the time where Seth was talking about it, but he uses the example of um, let's say you go into a coffee shop and you deal with a barista, okay? And let's say you deal with two different people. And the first person is pleasant, is cheerful. Maybe they remember your name. They're kind of a bright spot in the day. And then the second person is detached, eh, is doesn't make an effort, doesn't go above and beyond. Actually makes you feel like you're kind of bothering them. Now, there's fundamental attribution error, which is a very good lens to look at the world through. We don't know what kind of day that person is having. Is maybe they're having a bad day, maybe there's something going on. So I don't judge. But if you consistently have this same experience with a service professional that you frequent a place, you will see the trend. Which person do you still think is working there in 6 months? Yoni, which one?
The one who's happy to be there.
Wrong. It's a trick question.
Oh, okay.
Here's why.
Yep.
Because usually the person who goes over and above gets noticed. They they're happy to be, but the kind of successful business owners and professionals that go in and frequent places like coffee shops will take notice of the person and be like, hey, they'll hand them a card and say, you know what, if you're ever looking for a job, I'd love to talk to you. or they get noticed within an organization of some kind. They tend to get promoted, or they tend to have more opportunities because that's the attitude they take of the rest of the world. Whereas the person who, yes, the person with the sour attitude oftentimes ends up bouncing around jobs or gets fired or whatever, but oftentimes there are not a lot of opportunities for them. So they end up stuck in that place. So they stay there.
Hmm.
And if you think about it through that lens, you tend to, it's surface area of luck. It's create your own luck. It's law of attraction, whichever lens you want to look at it through. I love the frame of surface area of luck. The more positive touch points that you have with the world, and again, this goes back to one of the reasons why I'm busy as a trainer. Like uh, all of the different people I ever met. If I met someone in passing through someone, I would add them to Facebook. And then I'm posting on Facebook the early days before Instagram's a thing, my client lifting videos, I'm writing there, whatever. And then I stay top of mind as the person, the go-to person. Because a lot of people think, well, I'm going to post on social media, I'm going to annoy these people who don't care about fitness. Well, maybe, but guess what? Something happens where they walk up the stairs after a while, they're out of breath and they get a scare, or a parent or a friend says, hey, do you know any good trainers? You're the person they think of. This is a very powerful thing. And just even
Hmm.
being connected to people on social media is an outsized lever as well.
Love that. Okay, so expanding the chances that you have good luck can be directly correlated to the way you interact with the world around you, with whoever you're providing service. I
Mhm.
love that thought. That's Godin's thought. That's his concept,
No,
or that's Andrew Coates.
I think that's more of something that I've put together from all these things. Again, we don't know. You read enough things, and you sometimes like there's certain books that have certain topics in it, but I think also our philosophies will we read books and things that we already sort of agree with will resonate with us. So
Mhm.
therefore, sometimes it's hard to know you where the book ends and you begin. Does that
Yep.
make sense?
Yeah,
But I
that
think as
makes a ton
well,
of
if
sense.
you over long enough time horizon, you're so influenced by a great book that it becomes part of your operating system. And so it just feels like it was always there too. So these things blend together.
I love that. Okay, we're gonna come back heavily into books,
Mm.
how you vet them, how you learn the most from them, et cetera. You're obviously a very working brained individual. So I really want to dive into that. But first, I want to go clinical. Okay.
Okay, please.
Um, okay. So I saw an awesome post that you put up. It
Mhm.
had a picture of Conor McGregor. It talked about yeah, it was good. It was good. It talked about framework for maintaining muscle and strength while a given limb is immobilized, and that struck a chord with me because that's so much of my life. So,
Right.
when we have, let's say, post-op Achilles repairs, they
Mhm.
walk in and I'm thinking as a clinician, I know I need to get that gastroc, which attachment point has recently been repaired, to at least remain as robust as possible while it's immobilized. What are some of the core concepts I need to be thinking about to achieve that while they're sitting in the boot?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this from the lens of being a personal trainer. Okay.
Please.
First of all, is I want to collaborate with the rehabilitation professional, which is usually the physical therapist. Sometimes it's the orthopedic surgeon. So that way, the actual rehabilitation of the injury is being managed. So I don't try to prescribe and necessarily directly manage that. Okay. That's just a scope thing. All right. Um, but here's how I'm looking at it. What tends to happen when someone sustains an injury? They sprain their knee, they break their wrist, they tear a bicep, broken ankle. I got a funny story in a second about a broken ankle. Uh, it becomes a very socially acceptable reason to not come to the gym because the population that I work with aren't necessarily like me, where they're just so motivated that they'll show up at the gym no matter what. It's a challenge for them. So you've presented now, they've sustained an injury, then now they can stay home. And we know, rehab professionals know that like even resting an injured tissue, it depends on the nature, the time horizon and the nature of the injury, but resting that tissue is not actually the answer at all. It's but we want to keep that person active. Okay. So, can I create a psychologically safe environment and a plan and to be able to say to them, I can't count the number of times I've had someone in my world find out that they've, again, torn an ACL, ruptured a bicep, done all this other sort of stuff. I'll give you the specific example of my client. So, a client of mine was really excited to go down to Mexico. He had a week long trip, uh, to go, and I'm sure there was booze involved. In fact, I know there was. And day one, he's a little too excited, and I'm sure there's alcohol, and he's running in flip flops on a pool deck. So anyway, he ends up slipping. He falls down one flight of concrete stairs and breaks his ankle, right? Busts it up really bad. So he spends his entire week at a Mexican hospital, has a surgery on it, comes back, has to have another surgery. And so in that situation, what am I going to do with him? Well, if he stays at home for 3, 4 months while he's fully recovering from this thing, well, what's going to happen? Number one is he's losing the habit, which is a big thing we're trying to maintain. It's not going to be good for his metabolic health. He's going to be far less active. He's not walking around, right? He's not lifting weights. It's going to be negative for his mental health because again, he's
Sure.
not getting the direct mental health benefits of the exercise plus the limitations of his independence during that time horizon, the challenges. So he's getting less of all these sort of the stimulation. So if I could have a plan to actually have that person say to, hey, this is what we're going to do. And in that case, I'm going to where logistically, and there's always like real world logistics. Like, oh, cool, let's have him do upper body. Okay, cool, let's go get a pair of heavy dumbbells because he's strong upper body. Well, can he unrack those dumbbells and carry them and kick them up off a knee where he's literally in an ankle cast? Okay, logistically, no, but can he bench press? Barbell bench press machine, etc. Sure, you can do chest pressing. So you can do a ton of upper body stuff as long as the practical logistics work and he can get
Hmm.
around the gym. Uh, but we can train a single leg. Okay, we can do the other leg. So what can we do? We can sit him in a leg press. We can single leg extensions. We can do single leg hamstring curls. Um, Depending on the nature of the injury, I've had a lot of people with various knee stuff, and they can actually handle hinge patterns, no problem whatsoever. Romanian deadlifts are perfectly on the table. If someone's in a boot cast, we probably can't load it vertically to that point, but there's a lot of other like knee stuff, like problems with ACLs, for example. Okay, if it's a pure hinge, they tend to tolerate it perfectly.
Yep.
Game on, we're good, right? So again, you know what you have to figure out what works for that person, their psychology, but also physically. And now we're getting into the cool stuff, the cross education. So I can't count the number of times I've had clients come in and I've had people show up and be like, oh, this is hurting today. Or I get a text, it's like, yeah, I broke my ankle. Like that's happened. I can
Yeah.
think of one of my clients, like broke her ankle last New Year's. And so as soon as she was able to get back in, we were doing everything I just described. And so there's a whole bunch of research studies on this. And it's a phenomenon called cross education. And it's not 100% understood at a granular level exactly what's going on, but it seems to be a neurological innervation is the way I like to present it, where if you train the healthy limb, it does stimulate the injured and immobilized limb, where we see less atrophy, loss of strength and muscle of that injured limb, right? Now, most of the research studies that I've seen on it tend to have durations of about 4 to 6 weeks. So, yes, you're going to have a situation where, let's say, someone has ripped. I got a friend, he was filming himself dunking, and as he's jumping up, he ripped his quad tendon off. Okay. You can't cross education out of like seeing some atrophy. That's a very serious injury. Not to mention, he wasn't able to go back to the gym 3 days later and train the other side. Okay.
Yep.
Again, there's a practical reality of these things. But it's still better to do all of this stuff, and you still are getting some stimulation and innervation of that, whether it's nervous system innervation, probably some blood flow, whatever's going on. We are seeing consistently across these studies a pretty robust, and I can't off the top of my head like quantify the differences, but a robust difference in the maintenance of muscle mass and muscle strength of the
Yep.
injured limb. Now, up until recently, all the studies that I'd seen were artificial situations where there's like we're just putting a cast on someone on their wrist, on their calf. So most of the research, not all, but most of it was kind of in forelimbs and it was in uninjured people. So it was one of my criticisms that it's literally in a presentation I do on this, like this is still something worth looking at. Well, there's a study, it's newer, and it's going to go into my new presentation when I do this for the NSCA in Calgary on May 2nd. There is a study where they had populations where they took people with ACLs and ACL tears and reconstructions.
Yep.
I think it was a reconstruction. And so in one half a group, one of the groups, they did the traditional rehabilitation for that leg. And the other group, they actually did the cross education training. And what they saw was greater benefit for the population where there was an injury mechanism present,
Yep.
right? Where they did the cross education protocol of training. And I don't
Hmm.
remember the exact protocols off the top of my head, but it was certainly enough of a difference to validate this thing. Whereas I think there was the limitations in the research prior. So I'm pretty confident this is a very real, robust effect. but even if somehow it was like complete fairy dust, all of the other things that I described, the reasons to have someone still go in and train are so valuable anyway
Yeah.
that it would still be worthwhile doing. And I think one of the big fears is people think, well, oh, we're going to have one limb is going to atrophy and the other one is now going to be like pop-eyed up and you're going to have this ridiculous disparity. And I saw something recently. Some young guy had done something where I think for an entire year he had just like done shrugs on one side and trained his one trap, and he didn't on the other. And the guy looked ridiculous. And you occasionally get these uh, arm wrestlers that exclusively arm wrestle on one side, and you can definitely see like a fairly big difference in the muscle thickness, the size, the strength of one side versus the other. Yeah, sure. Over big enough time horizons, absolutely. It's not an avocation to just train one side and never train the other. The effect is nowhere near that powerful. But for shorter time horizons, I think for 4 to 6 weeks, certainly even upwards of 3 months, it's still better because what's the alternative? It's not doing any of the training and then coming back, and then you're going to be in a more deconditioned state overall. You're going to see more atrophy on that leg. Now, again, I can't quantify it with a specific research. You'd probably know this better than me, but we also do see people tend to bounce back. Like once you get back to normal, resuming normal activity. I mean, muscle memory is a very robust thing. It's a real thing. So we do tend to see people bounce back pretty well. But if we can actually reduce the amount of deficit that's created, both on that limb, but also like globally with like our overall conditioning, we're still way better off.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a lot of good points there. Number one, like an amazing example of your arm wrestling tidbit is Rafael Nadal. Like I think
Ooh.
he's a lefty, right? His left arm is massive, and his right arm looks like mine. Like it's crazy. So
Mm.
it's really stark. So you're right. Like there are levels to it. When we have these immobilized athletes and we're trying to train more globally, I think you're right. There is the crossover concept, which is more neuromotorically driven, but also systemically, we're getting growth hormone release. We're
Mhm.
getting all those benefits. You make a great point, which I would not have thought of, which is the mental side of it, which is just keeping the habit and greasing those wheels. How do you program that when they're under your care and you're training the unaffected limb? What's the ideal program there? Give me like sets and reps to avoid like this
Mm.
massive unilateral discrepancy.
Well, if anything, I'm not really worried about the massive unilateral discrepancy because think about the time horizon. When have you ever seen a normal everyday person or even a fairly like serious athlete who is not drug aided,
Yep.
take a 4 to 12 week time window of training
And put
and
on that
see
much mass. Yeah.
exactly right. Unless you're like, I love the old like days where people are talking about Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. And this is an obscure baseball reference, but does anybody remember Brett Boone? He
Sure.
was just like 5'9", I don't know, maybe he was like 170, 180 pound second baseman who'd hit like 18 home runs a year and hit 245. And the same season that Seattle Mariners had Ichiro Suzuki debut, which is a big deal. Brett Boone showed up looking like a bodybuilder, and he must have had 40 pounds of muscle on this 5'9" frame. And he goes off and he's like, I think second in MVP vote. He hits like 330 something. I don't know, it's like 36 home runs, 144 RBIs, just like becomes a superstar overnight. It's like, yeah, that wasn't
That's not
natural, bro.
real. Yeah.
Right, the heights of that era. And he's one of the names that rarely gets linked to this shit. I'm not interested in policing who did what. I love that era of baseball. Sorry, guys, it was fucking great, right? The Bash brothers.
Yeah.
But um, for natural people, let alone like just everyday people, we're just simply not going to see the kind of growth
Mhm.
that this is even like. I'm not even concerned about it. It doesn't even enter my thought process because the alternative will, I think, lead to a greater disparity. And that's the thing. It's like which is going to create the greater disparity? Continuing to train this limb or not? So my attitude is, okay, let's say we really want to take it seriously. Maybe we just focus on maintenance volume for the contralateral limb to the
Yep.
injured limb. And then we can also like what did classic bodybuilders always do when they were hurt? They worked on weak points, right? So what can we do? We could put everything else on maintenance volume. A common question that comes up with this discussion is, okay, are we training too much to interfere with the recovery of the injury? Outside of elite athletes or bodybuilders or what have you. I'm not worried about that being a problem equation as well, unless there's some major recovery deficit in that person's lifestyle, which actually is quite valid for a lot of people. Are they having problems sleeping? Is there issues with their nutrition? For the general population, sure, that stuff's valid. But I think that we can actually, at the very least, train progressively for if you've got a broken, let's say a torn bicep. Can we train legs progressively? Totally. Now, let's get into some of the practicality. If someone's got a torn bicep, can they do a bilateral overhand, let's say Romanian deadlift or 2 dumbbells? They probably actually can't do that. So
Yep.
is that exercise on the table? No. One of my favorite tools when we have an injured upper body limb is a safety bar. Okay, safety squat bar. We can do split squats with it over our shoulders. You can hold on with one arm. You can squat with it. It's great because oftentimes a cast will prevent someone from getting their hands on a traditional barbell in that position. Uh, you just appropriately load a good morning in place of a Romanian deadlift. Just make sure if someone doesn't have that skill or you're not used to using it, you start light. You think like don't have force exceeding tissue tolerance. How do we get injured in the first place? Something happened, right? So you just graduate their exposure to something if you're doing something completely new. That person can easily sit down in a leg press, a leg extension, hamstring. Like machines are fucking
Yeah.
fantastic.
There's so much.
And
There's
then
so much to do there.
and maybe one of my favorite things, like let's say you like pushing a sled around and that person again, upper body limb can't push the sled. You want to know a nasty little piece of work if your sled works. Take a couple of big bands, wrap it around the poles of a sled, and like L sit, push it backwards.
Hmm.
Okay. That your clients will love, hate it. It's awful, but it's wonderful. It works very well. You don't even have to load it very heavily. And again, the arm is not in a vulnerable position. So all you have to like every trainer is creative enough. Okay, so way before I knew that cross education was a thing, way before I got into research, I've been dealing with clients showing up with injured shit all the time from snowboarding issue or God only knows whatever they were doing. Again, like the running of the pool decks. So I was just always working around this stuff anyway. I think a lot of trainers are listening, like, yeah, I've done this stuff.
Yep.
And then I go like, oh shit, wait a minute. There's a whole bunch of like really cool research on this topic. And this actually works better than we thought it did. And I've never had anybody I've taken through this protocol and come out the other side going, well, we fucked
We
up.
screwed that up.
One arm looks like, Ronnie in his prime, and the other one looks, well, non-existent, right?
Yeah.
It's just none of that shit. That's never happened. So I'm not worried about it. And I wanted to also point out something too in your Rafael Nadal example.
Yeah.
What is generally true of elite athletes in any sport? They're going to have significant asymmetries, right? There is a potential orthopedic cost for playing your sport at an incredibly high level. Fuck, even if I'm Canadian, okay? I didn't grow up playing hockey, but what do a lot of Canadians who love hockey have? Missing teeth.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems to be like a rite of passage. I was a cross-country skier, provincial medal winning cross-country skier in Newfoundland. And a friend swung a ski pole around and knocked out one of my 2 front teeth. So it's a crown. Like I skipped the hockey, still lost the tooth, right? But anyway, and again, people like make these trade-offs to do things they enjoy. I do not think that Nadal's millions.
I don't think he's
I
trading
don't
them.
think I don't think, yeah, I don't think he's going to go and be like, oh, this one arm that's a little bigger than the other one is somehow like impacting my quality of life. I think the money and the accolades, and he's always seemed to be like a gracious and positively well-received person. You mentioned like a Conor McGregor. If there's a polarizing figure, and discounting the allegations of shit he's done, even as a popular heel in fighting circles, he probably walks through society and some people are just as likely to cheer at him as they are spit on him. I think Nadal is beautiful, like overwhelmingly like beloved. So, but if you think about almost all athletes, yes, I think there are some things. I think when you get into hockey players, football players, rugby players who've dealt with concussion issues, and then maybe like we can't diagnose CTE until someone's literally on an autopsy table, but we kind of know, right?
Yep.
The ones that are struggling. That is a nasty trade-off. But almost everything else, most of these people, like, okay, cool, we're a little bagged up these joint things. There's some sort of asymmetry, maybe even if it gets like a little bit dysfunctional. But if you're playing a sport you love, especially if you did it professionally and you're rewarded for it, or even the people who took their shot at the pros, right? There are, some high-profile NFL players who got hurt pretty, like what is it, RG3, Kajana Carter, I think it was a I'm dating myself.
Throwback, yeah.
Blew out his knee with the Bengals many years ago, and okay, you had your shot. There's some of these like high-profile NBA players. Greg Oden was I think what was he? He was the first pick, and Kevin Durant was the second pick that
Very
year.
good,
And
dude.
obviously Durant is obviously a future Hall of Famer, even if he's I don't particularly like him. This is a side quest, but he keeps getting called out for like messing around, arguing with people on the internet with
Yep.
burner phones, like petulant childlike behavior. Okay, fine, but guess what? He's got millions. He doesn't care my opinion on this, or he shouldn't care what anybody else on the internet thinks either. But Greg Oden was supposed to be a great player. Injuries early on just derailed his career, and there's lots of examples of this sort of stuff. Well, yeah, sometimes those lives don't work out super well, but do you think that guy regrets not making it? Sure. Do you think he regrets trying for it? I doubt he does, right?
Yeah, yeah. So have you in working with athletes like this,
Mm.
is there and maybe it's not research based, but like something that you've seen tried and true that has maximized the crossover effect, whether it be isometrics, whether it be training to failure, things like that?
Mm. I mean, I think the same principles apply because, again, like I said, um, once, whenever you're dealing with an injury, and I think this is a distillation down of things, but I think it's rehab at its fundamentals, is rehabilitation pretty much looks like regular training. It's just regress to what the tissue can tolerate, right?
Should.
That seems to be
Yes.
what the best optimal evidence-based approach to rehab is, as I understand it. Again, I'm not a rehab professional,
No,
but I've been
you're
surrounded by
right.
a lot of smart
I'll
ones.
correct you
Okay,
if you're wrong. You're right. Yeah.
thank you. All right,
Yeah.
I always try to approach this within my strongest knowledge base.
Yeah.
So, what are we really doing on the injured side? Well, again, I want a rehab professional to guide. You certainly have some guidelines and boundaries, but even when we don't have that, someone's banged up, we can we can alter a lot of different things. We can add constraints like or remove constraints. We can add stability. Oftentimes, just putting someone in a more stable position, a joint just tolerates something better when it's otherwise cranky. Cool. Maybe a pendulum squat machine or hack squat machine works better than a free squat. Okay, there's a good example, right? So we can manipulate that variable. We can certainly manipulate the load. Sometimes training to failure is fine. It's just that they need a lighter load and they tolerate the lighter load. Okay. I mean, we can get into things like I've never practiced it, but occlusion training, like blood flow
Mhm.
restriction stuff. It's a classic training tool for someone where there's some sort of injury issue. We want to, have a robust hypertrophic stimulus, but they just can't load it very much. Okay, so we load it lighter. We add, or even if you don't, you can usually get a pretty good pump, get to near failure, whatever. It's a pretty good stimulus. Certainly more than enough to maintain, if not make some progress. Right. I'm trying to think of some other examples. Um,
I mean,
but everything else. Oh,
I was gonna say, like, the BFR example is very interesting because we find in upper limb training with BFR, when you're even attempting to strengthen the rotator cuff,
mm,
putting the cuff below or distal to the cuff actually increases the cuff's ability to grow, to fire, et cetera. Like,
mm,
you get all the benefits of BFR, and so what that is telling me is it's actually the systemic response that we're seeing, and that really
mm,
correlates beautifully with this idea of crossover training, right? Like
mm,
we are affecting a system, and we have to get out of the concept of we're training an individual joint, an individual
mm,
muscle. Rather, we're training the system. I think that's a great example of why it's important to cross train.
yeah. I also suspect there's something here too. And this, again, it goes back to the value of like passive modalities in rehab. It's okay if something hurts and someone doesn't tolerate it, whether it's a very psychological fear of that loading and movement, or it's the actual like experience of pain. If you can load it in a different way, maybe it's lighter and allow for movement, getting into greater range of motion. Well, everything else is being trained. So I can think in that BFR example, I'm sure part of the what's going on is in order to load and train the rotator cuff, we actually have to load the limb. If it's the difference between loading it heavier and it's painful or loading it lighter with BFR or not,
Mhm.
and you can move, you tolerate it well, you're still loading the rotator cuff better. So you've just created an environment where you can actually now load it versus before the pain somewhere else was preventing us from actually getting the kind of training stimulus on the rotator cuff we needed to make progress. So I'm
Mhm.
confident that plays a role in that too, right? And a lot of this stuff is just about the physical and psychological safety to get someone to move. It's why, I mean, certainly with the populations I'm dealing with, I'm rarely concerned with what's optimal at the moment. Optimal is just making sure that they're not losing ground, that they're in there. Again, the metabolic, mental health, physical benefits of training, because it's a time horizon we'll get past, and then I just want them to launch forward without having lost much ground, so that way we can get back to, ideal training for them.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. That's why that's why we say movement is medicine. I think you just make a great
Mhm.
point. Like, yes, we know from research that there is this crossover effect, and also like all the benefits you just mentioned, just keeping them active, how far that goes. Okay, let's shift gears,
Mhm.
Andrew. Ready? Because obviously you're a lifelong learner. You're insanely well
Mhm.
read. Either that, or you just collect books behind you. Give
Both. Little from
oh,
column A, a little from column B.
okay, I love that. How do you decide what is worth reading?
Okay. I'll side quest for a second. Everybody listening will probably have a handful of books. I mentioned Lynchpin, Seth Godin, that are really influential to you.
Mhm.
What you'll notice is as you read more, you'll find a lot of the same ideas rehashed in different places. But the books you were exposed to first will be the more foundational. That's because that's where you got the ideas first, and they meant something to you. Later on, they're just being repeated. So, and if a long enough time horizon, the books that introduce these ideas earlier probably are going to be the more influential things. So that can frame your experience. Um, when I start to see the same ideas repeated over and over in books, then I tend to tune them out. So I think one of the things is being willing to abandon a book quickly, right? To start more books and abandon books quickly. You don't need to finish them all off. Um, there's a few things that I do just tactically. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. So when I'm driving, when I'm cooking, doing other things, so that way my time to sit down and actually physically read is more limited. And there's certain things that are hard to do on audio. Let's say I'm working on any of the more technical training stuff that's right behind me here, then I can't do on audio. What have I got here? Brad Schoenfeld's The Science and Development of Muscle Hypertrophy, right? That thing doesn't play well as an audiobook. Okay. So guess what? Physical reading time for something like that, or a textbook, or if I'm doing a course. So I will do a couple. Okay. I find there's not a lot of interesting stuff that's new. I recently finished, and it hasn't been released yet, depends on the time you do this, but I want to put on everybody's radar Dr. Tommy Wood. So he wrote a book called The Stimulated Mind. It's going to come out late March. I've pre recorded an episode of my podcast with him. It'll be out. He just was on Rogan. And Tommy's brilliant. But this is a book on the guy is just his story's unbelievable. He's an Oxford educated medical doctor. He's got a PhD, but he's one of the preeminent people in the world on cognitive decline, neurological disease, and then the lifestyle interventions. He's a performance coach. He works with like Formula One racers. Okay, this is
Yeah,
one of the groups that he works with. Um, Great guy,
I think I heard him
and
on Diary of a CEO.
it's possible he may
Yeah.
have been. So I got an advanced copy of his book, but he sent me a PDF, but there's no audiobook yet. So he told me, and I didn't even know about this, but he told me to get Speechify. And I'm like, okay, what's this? I play around. Holy shit. So you can take a PDF or other text document, dump it into Speechify, and it will fairly instantaneously turn this document into a surprisingly good audiobook. Okay, holy shit. And there's a bunch of generic voices, but there's a handful of celebrities, and this was a really sweet thing for me. So, I mean, I'm not down with Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, the whole Goop thing. I think she's a major platformer of pseudoscience. She's wonderful as Pepper Potts in Iron Man and the Marvel movies. Is the I delineate there. Okay, forgive my pop culture references. If you guys like them, great. If
They're
you
great.
don't, I'm sorry. I genuinely am. Um, Paris Hilton, I actually respect the hell out of like what she's done in some ways. I think there's also a lot of like, I'm not interested in Paris's voice reading me shit. Uh, Snoop Dogg would be damn cool. Like Snoop Dogg
He's
is one of
not
the
on there?
options.
He is
He
on there.
is. No, he is.
Okay,
So
love
there's a
that.
very limited array of famous people that you could choose from. But the one I went with was an actor named John Rhys Davies. Now, I'm a big fan. I've loved him for years, but he's Gimli in Lord of the Rings, and I'm a big Lord of the Rings guy. He's also Indiana Jones' buddy Salah in two of the Indiana Jones movies. Right?
Okay.
And he's a classically trained British actor, wonderful dude. But anyway, I've got John Rhys Davies reading this book to me, and
It's
it's
awesome.
great. So the book is super. So it's just about being smart with your time. And then I recently got a hot tub, and I will just chill out in that thing. And I mean, it's cold winter here. I'll be out in freezing cold. It's magical. But I bought a Kindle, and so what I do is I take this Kindle and I'll sit in the hot tub with it, and I'll read the things that I'm working through. Like there's a fantasy fiction series called Malazan Book of the Fallen. If you guys are fantasy people,
Not me.
it's super awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense shit, but I like it. Or there'll be various books that I'm interested in. That I like books on copywriting, books on writing. I would rather read physical copies than audio. It works better for that format. And then I saw a friend of mine a few years ago. She was just sitting upright on a spin bike. I'm not this flexible, and she's reading a book. I'm like, that's not bad. So I'll sit in recumbent bikes. And one of my favorite things to do to get my zone two cardio is I'll sit in a recumbent bike. And first it was books, then I bring my Kindle because I have more options. And between all that, it allows me to do more of the things that I like. Now, again, it gets into this like obsession with optimization and productivity. You got to be a
Yeah.
little careful and guarded against that, but it will actually, I feel more emotionally satisfied and I feel physically good and I feel like I'm doing valuable things when I combine this habit stacking. And so this stuff just works for me, right? So that's the way that I can get through a volume of stuff. And but now back to the whole thing, I find there's not as much new and interesting and fresh ideas. So I'll give a shout out to a couple of friends of mine. Jonathan Goodman's a very good friend. John's a OG business mentor in the fitness industry. Uh, his book, his new one, Unhinged Habits, is great. His one before that, The Obvious Choice, one of my favorite marketing books of all time. And yes, he mentions me in it, which I'm spoiled. I
Love it.
actually wrote 9 pages of his book before The Obvious Choice. I know I have. Oh, where is it? Oh, it's not up here. Shit. Okay. I got it somewhere downstairs, but getting clients referrals. Anyway, so yeah, I keep appearing in his books, which is great. And then Brad Stulberg's writing is great. Brad's a big lifter guy. He's got a book called The Way of Excellence, is his new one. It's spectacular. So I find their ideas fresh and interesting. The Stimulated Mind by Dr. Tommy Wood. And other than that, I look out for authors that I like. And so I try to keep an eye on when new stuff's coming out. But I'm willing to abandon something fairly quickly, even if it's an author I like, if I'm not getting great ideas from it.
So yeah, so what is that tipping point? Because that's something I struggle with massively. Like I crack a book and I'm like, I have to finish this, and I'll white knuckle it until the end. What is the point where you're like, I'm out?
I don't know if I can define it for everybody because it could be different, but I think the best way to look at it is the narrative about I have to finish this book. Okay. Because there's sunk cost, there's opportunity cost, right? These are just heuristics. So what you've already read is sunk cost. You've purchased the book. Sure, you can probably go like, sell it at a used bookstore or gift it to someone and like you get some sort of other value. But like, okay,
Yeah,
it's a sunk cost. You can't get the time back, you can't get the money back, realistically. Or you'd probably waste more time than the value of your time by trying to like get your money back in this book. So just whatever, right? Um, so, but I think the narrative is the problem. It's like, oh, I have to finish this book. And a trap that I caught myself in earlier years of my career is like, oh, I want to read as many books as possible. And then like I would post a list every year of the books I read. And there's sort of this vanity and the status signaling that you can get caught up in just showing how many books you've read. And on one hand, I think the net benefit is you just are exposed to way more ideas and you will always pull stuff out of it. But the deeper you get into this literature, the more you find things are being repetitive. So I think that's it is if the ideas are not fresh or interesting,
yeah,
or if you find like, oh, this is just stuff that I've encountered before, then that's kind of a good sign. I think if you're really having trouble focusing on the material, and sometimes it's not that it's the wrong book, it's the wrong time for the book. One of my favorite books is The Courage to Be Disliked. It's a couple of Japanese authors. I apologize, I cannot memorize the names, but it's a when I first read it, there was a lot of buzz about it. Then I start reading it, and it's actually a parable between an older wise master and a younger petulant student who's fucking super annoying in this book. And at first I was like, this is terrible. I hate this. But I came back, I think it was a couple years later, and I finally was in a better position to appreciate the book for what it was. And I actually love it. I love the ideas. I think it's a brilliant book. I think it's a must read for most people. It's just, I just didn't know what kind of format I was going into. Like, I'm very picky with parable based books. The Go Giver is a fantastic book that's entirely a parable, whereas I think like the 5 a.m. Club, one of the most overrated pieces of literary garbage I've ever read. I actually like push back at this moral superiority of like waking up early. Yes, correlated across populations, the people who are staying in bed later and staying up later, are they doing useful things with their time? Probably not. But
yeah.
this idea, anyway, so this is just a little hill I have to die on. But like, I hate the 5 a.m. Club. And it's, again, it's just this slow, meandering book full of like rubbish nonsense, way too long. And honestly, there's another thing with a lot of these books too. And it's not an argument to say go and like do the blink, what is the Blinkist or these other like summaries, because you don't
Yep.
get the robustness of the books. But most of these books really could, the ideas are so singular, they could be distilled down into,
A PDF.
God, yeah, an essay,
Yeah.
right? and then they just extrapolate them out. And that's usually how most of these books are written. It's just, okay, can you do a really great job the way that like James Clear does with Atomic Habits to fill it with things that add value cumulatively to where, hey, I'm better off for having read the entire thing.
Do you ever reread a book?
Yep,
And
all the time.
what makes you do that? How do you decide on that?
Okay, so and this kind of, there's a question you had in there, and I can't remember what it was, but it's to this point. We are in a place where we don't have to memorize everything in a book. Because one of the narratives that I would see people who would push back against like reading as many books as possible would always be like, no, you should like just read one book and just focus on it and pull everything. Like, yeah, you want to take the core ideas, but we don't exist in a world where we need to memorize anything. You can have physical books around as resources. Okay. I like having physical copies. You can reference them whenever you want. AI technology is going to get better and better at just like pulling things out. You can, I think it's a great idea to highlight, read. Like if you ever listen to Ryan Holiday, the way he reads, he says, like, I prefer keeping my books pristine, but his argument is that you should be making notes and putting things in
Mhm.
there. And like the book should look really like lived and used. And that's that's valid too. Uh, I think making notes as you go is a great idea. But I sometimes for me, it's just I just need a refresh and have the book top of mind. I read a lot of books on writing. And yes, I learn things from reading books on writing, but I found the far greater benefit is just any given time having a book on writing in my like on my table, I pick away at. It keeps the idea of writing fresh. It helps me inspire me with ideas. I recently did a writing course by a creator named Dan Coe, Koe. And I love his stuff. It's a 2 hour writing course. If you're really interested in writing, I honestly I would go right to it.
Hmm.
And but as I'm going through it, I'm finding that I'm constantly distracted because I get ideas about things I want to write, short form stuff for social media, long form article. But I find it very inspiring. It keeps the practice of writing very top of mind. And I find I'm a much better writer, more prolific writer, more productive writer when I am consuming something about writing. It's just you have to be careful not to get caught into the emotionally soothing thing about consuming, which just procrastinates from
Yeah,
taking action
I'm
and doing
actually
useful
doing it.
shit.
Okay, so
Mhm.
if you push back heavily on 5 a.m. Club, what
Mhm.
in the fitness industry did you once read that you would push back on heavily now?
We would need 5, 6, 10 hours to probably unpack all those things. I just I mean, God, so much. I mean, the stitching, sensationalism, the tribal, like status building, clout chasing, that we're seeing this kind of war zone with stuff with social media. And there are people who go at other people, and I like their messaging media, and I think there's net value in what I'm learning from it. But underpinning a lot of this stuff, there's still a fair bit of clout chasing there. And again, someone's going to hear this and be like, "Well, what about this person?" Like, well, that person I fucking love, right?
Yeah.
But then there's some other people, and you'll hear Muscle Doc Jordan Shallow is great at this. My friend Don Saladino, we we're just talking about this. They're good friends with each other. They hate when people take other people's content, stitch it, and attack it. They just hate it as a rule. There's a lot of other very smart and successful people in the industry that don't do this stuff. There are some people that do, and then you get like I'll give a big shout to Lane Norton's a good example. He's been video based stuff going at like the dumb shit that other people say, the verifiable charlatans. Then there's some people who are pretty evidence based. Will go at Lade for some stuff they disagree on too, and like Lade in his blind spot. So, but my thought has always been that why doesn't like Lane and Mark Hyman just fucking block each other, right?
Yep.
But you realize that what's really going on here? It's Batman and the Joker, and it's symbiotic, and a lot of why they are where they are is because they know how to play this particular game. And I don't necessarily object to the game. I just like to caution coaches to be careful about. I think what a lot of people do is they go straight to the short form video based media and that kind of attack mode thing without actually having built much of a practice of foundation, verifiable business success, vehicles for education. Someone like Lane, he's got a pretty big track record of having done a shit ton of that stuff. He's also been very savvy with media. So if you're savvy with media, I think that's amazing. It's just, can you also underpin it with like a legacy of, you know, being a real coach, verifiable results, a thriving business? It depends on how you build that business, and you may not still actually work with the people in front of you.
Yep.
Uh, but I don't know. I think video-based social media stuff, the viral stuff, can be really good. I understand why anybody would be drawn to it, but I think a lot of coaches struggle with the idea. They don't necessarily want to get these stitch wars. The other thing is too is you got to have some thick skin. If you're going to play that game, you live
Yep.
by that sword, you will die by that sword. And there's some really nasty shits coming back your way. And I just opt out of it because my mental health, this stuff would just emotionally dysregulate me and distract me from my real mission, which is still coaching full time in person, podcast writing, et cetera, et cetera. I'm too busy to be caught up in this shit.
Yep.
And that's also a narrative to avoid that style of video-based media. I think it's a good narrative, but it's still a narrative. It's a post-rationalization, be like, oh, I never went that way. But I've also seen a lot of status chasing, a lot of cloud chasing. And I think some coaches get sucked into that vortex thinking that that's what matters. And that
And
I've
that it's the
seen
only
as
way. I think a
the
lot of
only
people
way.
think it's the only way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're going to look at this, zoom out, and Yoni, like, who are some examples of traditional authorities, whether the evidence-based community or successful fitness-based operators, rehab-based operators that you look at and go, they've been a big influence on my career? Who are some of those people?
Evidence-based, I think I really appreciate Eric Cressy's work. I really appreciate Mike Reinhold's work in the PT side. He's done a great job. I've been very impressed with Kevin Wilk and his ability to like stay current and adapt. I think so. I think those on the rehab side.
Yep.
Not in the evidence side. I'm a sucker for Kelly Starrett. I
Okay.
think like his just passion and his delivery. I think is super engaging. So those would be the answers off the top of my head.
And what do we? So let's zoom in on Eric Cressy, right? So Cressy has Cressy Sports Performance, right? They're a legendary facility.
Yep.
Eric got a big boost by writing for T Nation early in his career for a long time, very prolific in those days. His work with a lot of baseball players, including multiple Cy Young Award winners. I mean, he's worked with Corey Kluber and Max Scherzer. Their facility, they had both the National League and American League Cy Young Award winners. I believe it might have been 2017. I don't
That's
know, but
insane.
anyway, at the same time. And that obviously parlayed eventually to him becoming I think I got the title, but basically the director of strength and conditioning for the New York Yankees, right?
Yep.
And Eric's didn't build his legacy on stitch-based video media.
Nope.
He built his legacy doing all these other sort of things. And ultimately, I was influenced and came up through that path. And again, it's why I started writing. It's why a friend wanted to start a podcast. And I did those things while still being full-time in person. And more people know who I am. I mean, sure, people find me through short form social media, but again, that's writing based. But the big pillars that stand out as a brand credibility thing are having written for the publications I have, having had the podcast and coaching, not because I'm a entertainer on social media. And again,
Yep.
it's not saying that cannot be a piece of the puzzle, but I really think, boy, it's worthwhile actually having like some really strong foundations on this stuff. And I'll throw some other great evidence-based, and some of them are actually very good with social media. Some of the doctors of physical therapy, Dr. Katie Dabrowski is fantastic. Dr. Sam Spinelli is a good friend. Dr. Michael Mash of Barbell Rehab is a really good example of stuff. Hell,
2 of those 3, by the way, on the pod, just so you know.
good
Yeah.
choices. Hell, I had Adam Meekins on my podcast a while ago, and Adam does these stitch-based,
Oh yeah.
he's even got at Eric Cressy. So like Adam sometimes like steps on his own toes a little bit. But hell, he's a smart dude too. But I can still handle a dose of the irascible stuff. But again, I've learned a lot from it, right?
Yep.
Sometimes he takes swings at other traditional authorities in the industry. I'm just like, I don't know about this. But it's another principle too. It's like I don't have to agree with everything everybody says. Most of the people like who've written books that I have behind me, who are friends of mine, I do not agree with the things that they say 100% of the time, and I can see their blind spots, and I just try to be open-minded to realize that I probably have them too, and therefore I'm willing to shift my belief systems with evidence, perspective, and
Yep.
things.
And I think that is such a healthy outlook. Like I think we get in trouble when we take everything someone says hook, line, and sinker, and we think it is right or gospel, not because it is, but it's because they said it. Right.
Mhm.
And I think like your ability to have that healthy outlook of, yeah, he's a buddy. I agree with 95% of what he says doesn't mean I can't disagree with the 5%. I definitely see
Yeah.
that with Eakins. He's such a freaking pleasure. Okay. Give me the one. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll give you an example. Like,
Yeah.
so Adam saw something Eric Cressy wrote very quickly. It was about something about spinal hygiene and where Eric was talking about injuries, more injuries happen when people are re-racking weights than they are, doing the lifts.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then Meekins went at him over it, and it's like, but here's several things happen. One is Eric's like, I just wrote it quickly. I've seen in my own experience people who've gotten hurt because they were dialed in, focused, braced for the lift, and then as they're going to re-rack it, they re-racked it in a way that they didn't set themselves up well, and they hurt their backs and whatever. Like, so I've seen it in practice. These are anecdotes, okay?
Yep. Yep.
So um, it's practical and common sense to be careful in how you re-rack weight. That is solid ground.
Yeah.
Eric
Yeah.
was on solid ground. Maybe we can't pull out, peer-reviewed research to actually validate the incidence of these injuries. Okay. But guess what? Most of what we do, we can't do that. It doesn't invalidate it. And then I can't remember specifically, but Adam pulled out a couple of studies that even I looked at. I was like, that's not even like really relevant to what we're talking about here. I still love Adam on the whole. And I could say, okay, I think you probably got that one wrong. And then there's a political side of this stuff. Eric is a very popular, well-liked guy in the North American strength conditioning industry. What happened? Oh my God, the like big names in the industry, the Ben Brunos and all these other people lined up to back up Eric. So for a quick like attack post, you've now pissed off a lot of very powerful people and closed a lot of doors to you. So it's like that one wasn't worth it. So you have to take these things holistic. Here's another example. And I mean, I don't like saying disparaging things about people, but as far as I'm concerned, Dr. Joel Seedman is fair game at this point. I used
Oh
to
my God.
He's a nice guy. I just got like,
Yeah.
I know what he's doing with his media. This clickbait nonsense. This stuff is stupid, but I'm not going to pay attention. But then he goes and puts up a post. Uh, it makes himself look good and saying when Halliburton, the Indiana
Saw
Pacer,
that.
who's
I
Ben
saw
Bruno's
that,
client,
dude. Killed me.
when he tore his Achilles because he had already been dealing with a calf strain in like game 7 of the NBA finals, it makes sense that he's got to try to push it, right? The game's on the line. And he turns around and says, oh, well, something to the effect like with my training, we could have like avoided that injury. The industry, and again, people, they think Seedman is a clown. He's a
Yeah.
performative clown. And like normally I wouldn't even say this sort of stuff. Now I'm like, gloves are off. You did this to yourself. And Ben was kind of quiet, but Joe DeFranco, who's a great dude, just gets mad. He puts
Yep.
up a video. He rips Joel apart, and decidedly so. And so now Joel, for whatever little bit of gain he might have gotten in terms of engagement, he got a lot of engagement off it. He turned a lot of people who otherwise just kind of like pretended he didn't exist or kind of laughed him off into being like, okay, now fuck you, buddy.
Yeah.
You've got it coming, right? And so there's always this political dynamic to this stuff too. And I think there are certain people in the industry who look at, well, this study says this, everything through the purity of like PubMed research. Yeah, evidence has to be the foundation of stuff. But I've seen a lot of people screw themselves by taking a very literal interpretation of a single study or like a body of evidence and just pick fights that turned around. And they're often, sometimes they're picking on sometimes it's the Joel Siemens or the functional patterns of the industry, which we know this is like
Yep.
clown nonsense. But sometimes they're picking battles with the good guys. And it's like,
Yep.
we're all on the same team here, different interpretations of stuff, people with legacies of good work.
Yep.
And it's like, you're fighting with these people over like clicks and clout.
I know. I
I,
always wonder, like, what goes into like before Seedman pushes post on that when he's going after Bruno. Like, what is the thought process? Like, how well thought out is that?
I'm going to give you guys a heuristic. And if you look at everything that people post on social media, especially if it's outrage based, especially if it gets socio-political, especially if it's tribal, a lot of people think with this one question in mind. And when you look at content through this lens, professionals, consumers, how can I make this about me? When you start to understand that that's what's going through a lot of people's minds, how can I make this about me? You understand everything. And while we throw around the word narcissism a little too loosely, we cannot ethically diagnose someone as being a narcissist. There is narcissistic behavior in our world. And a lot of this high road performative, look at me, I'm signaling what a good moral person I am, whether it's nutrition, whether it's training, whether it's socio-political ideology, right? A lot of this stuff we're dealing with narcissistic behavior where people are making shit about themselves and they cannot sit by while other things going on. They gotta go, I need to be the center of attention. Okay. So just see this for what it is. And then you start to see some of this stuff a little
Yeah, I
differently.
think I think it explains a lot. Okay, Andrew, give me the one most impactful book that you're getting into the fitness world. You're thinking, how do I figure this out? The number one book where you got to start with that you haven't mentioned already. What is it?
I am struggling to think of one. Bear with me. I will try my best. Okay, refine it for me. Are we talking broader, or are we talking actually something that is like very fitness centric? Oh, I got
Um,
one. I got one. I actually have one.
yeah, go ahead.
Is it up here? Yes, it is. The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stainer, because this permeates everything. Okay. This is a book about asking great questions. It is a book about thinking in terms of curiosity first instead of trying to display how smart you are. Instead of getting caught up in what he calls the advice trap, which he has a follow up book on, it is don't use the time that someone's talking to think of what you're going to respond with. Don't jump with especially in a consultation where the client, and they say something, and then trainers go, ooh, 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 let me show you how smart I am. I want to show you that I'm valuable. We should know now, rehab professionals, which a big challenge for rehab professionals who've worked in environments where you're getting people coming into you. Again, it's the stereotypical insurance-based car crash type of stuff. Those people don't want to be there. Okay. They want to do the bare minimum. And they have the preconceived notion that a physical therapist can actually like apply needling or some sort of manual therapy or whatever, and it's going to heal the injury. We know that's not how this shit works at all. Right. Um, but when you ask great questions, you approach from curiosity, you give people space to talk, but then you don't immediately go to here's the solution. Most people, rehab's a little different, but most people generally have a pretty good idea of what they need to do, especially with resistance, with exercise and nutrition. But can you ask a question in such a way that they arrive at the answer? And they're far more likely to change behavior and act on something if it's their idea versus your idea. So, amazing book, really well written, really easy to digest. And it's not about memorizing a series of questions, it's about thinking in terms of curiosity. And the more practice you get at asking questions, the more that you default, and you will start catching yourself where you were going to declare something and tell someone something. You stop and you go, no, this is a good place for me to ask a question and continue to ask questions. And this can be about the very training, nutrition, rehab stuff we're dealing with, or it's just getting interested in people in general. And it comes back to where we started with all this stuff. It's like if people, it's how to win friends and influence people in Dale Carnegie, right? Like, just, you know, if you want to be interesting, be interested
Hmm.
in people. I love learning about what's going on. I just had a client 2 hours ago. He's been with me for a few years. He was a client of another trainer who's a very close friend of mine who left the industry. That trainer would travel a lot. It was on TV. So he would have me train his client when he was gone. Now Gunnar is with me full time. And he knows what he's doing. He is strong. He knows the form, everything like that. He's not coming to me for coach. I don't know how many times in the last like 10 sessions I've done with him that I've actually offered a coaching cue, right? I tell him what to do, he does it, he's good at it. Do you want to know what we mostly talk about? World of Warcraft. Okay. I used to play it a long time ago. I can't let that enter my life. Like, that's addictive stuff. But oh, nostalgic. I love it. Love talking about it. He's actively playing it. And that is what we spend more of, not exclusively, but a lot of our time. And then we're talking about old boss fights. And we're just talking about stuff. If anybody who's a World of Warcraft player, we're just talking about the Kel'Thuzad fight at the end of Naxxramas. Okay. If you guys know what I'm talking about,
I
that's
don't.
specific. If you don't, I'm so sorry again. Right. But anyway, it's super fun. Like, we get jazzed up about it. I don't mind. I look forward to seeing Gunnar, that client, and I get paid really well for that hour, and he's happy to pay and reliably trade open ended. I will probably have him for years.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And we talk about World of Warcraft. That's a terrible hour of my day, I promise you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's pretty amazing. I also like that your choice doesn't just apply to fitness. It applies to relationships. So I think you're right. I think that's putting an awesome bow on it. Andrew, you have been a freaking pleasure. So as if people don't know where to find you, tell them where to find you.
Instagram. So Andrew, at Andrew Coates Fitness. on Instagram. That's the best place to find me. It's the platform I'm most active on. I will respond to any questions. I love messages. If you heard this, and you enjoyed it, I would love to actually just even the quickest message, just say hi. Please tell me you listen to this. If you ever want to ask for book recommendations on things like writing, on anything in career, I love it. I'm happy to. Um, I've been putting a lot of work into my podcast, the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. It's it's generally for the fitness enthusiast. Coaches love it. I've had a lot of brilliant strength conditioning coaches, rehab professionals, some of the ones we named. Uh, it's relevant to a lot of audiences.
For sure.
And I also I write less for the traditional publication. There's less of that. I'm trying to do more with my own Substack. I recently published something I think is very valuable. If you're interested in long form writing, just message me. You want to check out any of my articles. You can find a lot of things on my website as well, www.andrewcoatesfitness.com. But please start with Instagram. Please message me. And people listening, if you found this podcast through my media, then especially if you're interested in the rehab side of stuff, then go and scroll through the other guests. You said you've had a few people I've had. So my guess is you guys will find a lot of legendary figures in the fitness industry, people you like. You probably want to stick around. So please check that out because Yoni had a lot of options of people he could have brought on. This takes time. You did a lot of research. I mean, you sent me a whole bunch of questions beforehand. I don't try to memorize question answers. I scan them like, okay, good. Because I don't want to go in with I just like riffing.
Yep.
But you put a lot of time and effort into this. That I don't take that lightly. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk to your audience. So thank
Dude, you make it easy. You make it easy. Guys, go check him out. Like Andrew said, thank you. We appreciate the audience so much. We get to do awesome stuff and talk to awesome people. Andrew is obviously one of those people. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Let us know what you love. Let us know what I could have done better. Let me know who else you want to have on. Really appreciate you guys listening. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
You know what? One more thing.
Shoot.
Everybody, the traditional listeners, go give this guy a review. For the love of God, please. You're actually one of the best podcast hosts I've heard. Great energy with the stuff. Obviously, you put a lot of effort into this. I was on Coach 'em Up with Tim Riley. That's a hell of a podcast. Tim is one of the best hosts I've ever had. And there's a lot of good people, but not a lot of people make me think, man, this guy's in that kind of territory. So you're a great host. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. That means a lot. Andrew, I appreciate you. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.